What's up, YouTube? Today we're gonna be reacting to Ashley Inc. She tells about alien stories, UAPs, all that. Welcome to my YouTube where I do reactions. I react to scary stories. I react to conspiracies. I react to horror stuff. I react to comic books. I react to whatever I feel. You feel me? Welcome to my channel. I can only be me, and if you can feel me, join me.
Shout out to Marlo, shout out to Marlo, shout out to Marlo. You know, he made it beat it shit, it beat it shit, it beat it shit.
Let's get right into it.
Really human, or maybe it is. Maybe it comes from the ocean. Maybe. Let's talk about aliens because it's commonly a theme on Spooky Scary Story Time. Aliens, UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them. There's more and more talk about something being out there that's not entirely human, or maybe it is. Maybe.
Also, it's my first time doing videos, so I don't really have a spot the way I do things. So, my wife in the background. Let's get right into it.
Comes from the ocean, maybe it comes from the sky. Don't know. The thing is, if you're new here, Spooky Scary Storytime is a series where listeners send in their true, most unbelievable tales, or the things that they claim is true. And I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to tear their stories apart. I'm just here to tell them for y'all, and you guys can kind of go through them and use your discernment and try to pick out what you think is true, what you think is BS. Doesn't matter. My only thing is always be kind, try to respect other boundaries, other belief systems, because what's real to them may not be real to you and vice versa. Just because you don't believe in something doesn't mean it doesn't believe in you. So this video is going to be kind of a compilation style. I'm going to include some stories that I've already told in short form videos. I will just patch those videos right in. And I'm also going to be sharing some stories that I haven't shared either because they're too short or too out there. Because one thing that I've noticed is on other short form platforms like Instagram and TikTok, there is some seeming shadow bans when it comes to talking about topics like UAPs and UFOs. I don't know why that is. I don't know what I believe.
And I don't really feel that. You feel me? Because they trying to hide. But the thing is, these motherfuckers tired of hiding. That's why people see them no more. They tired of hiding. The truth is finna be unveiled. Fairy tales are real.
I definitely believe that we're not alone, but I haven't done the deep research that some people that are really into this subject have done. So I'm just going to put these stories here for posterity and let y'all make of them what you will. The first story is called Alien Chips, and it was submitted by someone named Yvonne. I have not told this story before. She said when she was about 5 years old, she was in the car with her mother, her aunt, and her siblings and her cousin. All the kids are sitting in the back seat while the mother and the aunt are in the front seat. They were driving through a wooded area in California when to their right they're passing this grassy spot, and there's a bunch of power lines, and under the power lines they see what looks like a UFO or an alien ship. She said that her aunt started screaming, or get out of here now, but then at that exact moment the car stalled. Her mom apparently was trying to start the car repeatedly, couldn't get it started. The next thing Yvonne knows is she blacks out and she is being carried back to the car. She's placed in the back of the car and she looks around and everything as it should be. Her mom's still in the front seat trying to start the car, but then she realizes that her younger cousin is not in the car with them. She looks out the window toward the grassy field, toward where they saw the alien ship, and she sees a long, tall, skinny, grayish man carrying the cousin very gingerly back to the car. He places the cousin back in the car. The parents don't seem to know what's going on. Yvonne is too scared to do anything. So she said she just stayed quiet. Then they get the car started and her mom barrels out of there. She said that she could hear the parents talking. They were saying, oh, we're so lucky that they didn't see us. But Yvonne said she was absolutely out of the car and she remembers being carried back to the car, although she doesn't know who carried her back. Years later, she's scratching at her leg one day over at her mom's house, and she'd kind of forgotten about that or chalked it up to just a childhood memory. She's scratching her leg, and her mom's like, what are you scratching at? And she says, oh, I've had this cyst on my leg for a long time. And her mom says, oh, that's weird. I have that same cyst in the same place, and so does your sister. And she said, oh, that is strange. She said she's not sure if her cousin or her aunt had one. She never checked. But she was in the process of joining the army at that point, and her mom said, oh, maybe you should have them, the doctors check it out. She said she never did, but a few years after that, she was scratching her leg and a small crystal popped out of that cyst. She says, I don't care if you believe me, you can use my name, I left everybody else's name out for a reason, but that's my story, it really happened, make of it what you will. So there's her story, short but to the point, moving right along.
This world big. I believe that shit. It be stuff happening to people that you can never even hear what story they say. Stuff could be happening. Stuff happening to people right now. This is real. If it's in any other books, the Bible, the Holy Tablet, everywhere these things been happening, beings coming here, is real. Y'all are half. Some of y'all are half of these people. They been doing this.
I'm going to share one that I've shared before, actually recently, and this came from a woman named Kirsten. They are on social media as 7 of the Stars, and she shares a story about her daughter, 7, who she claims has been in contact with the blue avian race since 7 was 2 years old. here's that story. Okay, so there's a little girl in Texas who's having legitimate contact with UAPs and things in the sky. Her mother emailed me about it. Her mother's name is Kirsten. And not only that, but like this has now been verified by the Mutual UFO Network, which is a nonprofit based in the US that is dedicated to the scientific investigation of UFO and UAP sightings. So like this is a legitimate contact case according to them. So this started back when the family was living in Utah, and she said that there was one night that they thought Seven was asleep. Her mother and her friend were down in the living room, and they heard Seven cry from her room. And so they go out there to investigate, and she said that she heard this like rhythmic like womp womp womp, like a heartbeat in the room. They walk in, and she said immediately when they stepped in the room, it felt like everything got sucked out, like even the feeling in her chest, like everything was just gone, and she felt like there was another presence in the room with them. She said that she expected to find Seven crying because they had heard her cry, but she was actually asleep in bed. The next morning when Seven wakes up, Kirsten goes to get her, and she has this perfect surgical, like already surgically healed scar on her arm in the perfect shape of a triangle. And she's like, where did you get that? And Seven says, oh, Omi gave it to me. And Omi is the name for her grandmother. And Kirsten's like, that's not possible. Omi is in Utah. And Seven's like, no, she took me last night and we went around flying in the sky and looking at the earth from above. So Kirsten's like, okay, weird, but doesn't put too much stock in it besides the fact that Seven now has a perfectly triangular scar on her arm, right? But then Seven starts telling her more, and she calls them blue aliens at first, but then she evolves to say blue avians, and she's like, what's a blue avian? And Seven's like, oh, they're these like bird-like beings. They came from Mars originally. So Kirsten's like, what is going on? They came from Mars? And Seven's like, well, now they live in another universe entirely. So Kirsten gets concerned, and she goes to the daycare teacher, and she's like, are you guys teaching them about space? Like, what's going on? And the daycare teacher's like, no, we're teaching them colors and shapes. Which, like, I have a 2-year-old. Okay, my son does not know anything about aliens or the sky. He knows red, blue, green. Kirsten said at this point she was absolutely terrified because she had no frame of reference. Like, she did not believe in aliens in that point, and she didn't know what to do. So she went to her friend, who was like a lifelong contact and was also a practicing psychic. And she was like, do you know anything about this? And her friend's like, oh, it's nothing bad. Seven probably agreed to this before she came to Earth. Like, don't worry too much about it. At this point in the email, Kirsten also told me that their property in Utah backed up to the NSA facility. So there's that. Also at this point, things started getting bad kind of around the house. She was going through a divorce. Her husband unfortunately had an affair. She couldn't make ends meet, so she was going to move back to Texas to live with her mom, and she was going to take Seven with her. She said they packed up the car one day. It was her friend, and then Seven. About 2 hours into driving, they're just on the open road, just having a little chat. Seven's asleep in the back seat, and they see these two massive crafts hovering above their car. Apparently then she just blacks out, and then when she comes to, they're further along the drive than she remembers. She has no recollection of that period. There's like a big chunk of missing time, and when she comes to, her friend is like, you were literally talking about people that don't exist. She has no idea what was going on. So that's when they get to Texas, she contacts the Mutual UFO Network, and then they come and they talk to her and they talk to Seven, and they verify that this is a legitimate contact case. They are living in Texas now. She said this was not a one-time event. Seven still apparently has contact with these beings, and she's been interviewed by many UFO journalists and many UFOologists, including Ross Coulthart, Mary Wadwell, and Jim Garrison. So Seven has said this is only the beginning. She talks to them. She talks to their ships. She says they are here. They are watching. And she says that she still describes their language, their worlds, and their way of thinking in ways that she wouldn't even be able to think of. She said she's speaking up about this because she believes there's other parents out there who are experiencing this and don't know what to do about it, and she believes that all of these children are supposed to come together for some reason. She did say she has photos, videos, things like that to send me. I asked for her to send those, but I'm still waiting on that, so I will post that as soon as I hear anything. I initially just posted that video yesterday, and I actually did receive some more correspondence from Kirsten after posting the story, and actually she said, hey, if you want to talk to Seven, she'd love to talk to you. I don't let her watch her TikToks because she's only 9 now, but she did watch that story, and she was in the comments of the original video responding to people. So I just emailed her back. I'm actually hoping that I get to talk to her, see where that goes, and that could potentially be a video in itself. Let me know if you guys want that. Of course, I have to ask consent to record it if I do. Moving right along, we'll share another one that has not been shared on social media yet. This came from someone who did not want their real name used, so we're just going to call her E, but she said when she was in high school, she woke up to what she felt like was a very real dream. It was sort of an out-of-body experience, and I'm noticing that that's a pattern with a lot of these stories. People can't tell if it's a dream or not because it usually happens in the middle of the night. She said she was in bed, she woke up in the middle of the night, and she had very bright lights coming in through her window. It was almost like headlights shining in her window, but she said her room was on the second floor of the house and her room faced away from the street. At that point, the house shook, almost like an earthquake. She thought she was dreaming, so she goes back to sleep, and that's when she said she woke up to what felt like an MRI pod. She felt like she was in a cage of some sort. She was able to peep out and see that the room that she was in was very brightly lit in white light. She said the pod she was in encased her entire body, and there were needles coming through the pod into her body, and she said she actually was wasn't in any pain. It just felt like they were taking her essence or her energy, if that makes sense. She couldn't see the beings that were in the room, but she knew someone else was in there because she could hear them walking around and talking softly. The next thing she knew, she woke up in bed, and she said she thought it was all just a dream until she realized she was sore all over her body. She also says she experienced extreme fatigue. That entire day felt like she hadn't been to sleep at all the night before. To this day, she still experiences body aches and extreme fatigue, although she doesn't have any proof that this really happened. She said, "It could have been a dream, but I do believe that I was abducted that night," although she never had physical marks on her body to prove otherwise. This took place in Kansas, if that means anything to anyone. This next story I'm going to share is another story that I originally posted to a short form platform. I'm going to include that clip, but you'll notice that it's very similar to the story that E just shared, as it takes place in the middle of the night and with the presence of bright lights and what seemed to be an earthquake. Place in Alaska called the Alaska Triangle, and the Alaska Triangle is known to people who live there as being a hotbed for paranormal activity, sightings in the sky, and there's also an unusually large number of disappearances there every year. The middle of the Alaska Triangle is a town called Wasilla, which is like a decently large city. It's not in the middle of nowhere or anything, but about 200 miles from there is HARP, which is supposedly a weather research station that focuses on the ionosphere and the northern lights. But a girl messaged me and she said she grew up there and her dad had a whole theory on what HARP was actually for, and she's had experiences of her own. So it says ever since she was small, she remembers seeing lights in the sky behave in ways that they shouldn't. She would ask her parents what it was. They would say, "Oh, it's a plane. Oh, it's a satellite." But when she was about 10 to 12, her dad started talking to her about things that he saw. The child says nothing really weird happened until she was 17. Up until that point, all she had really seen was stars that formed perfect triangles and they would drift across the sky. And usually that happened after she would watch the northern lights. But when she was 17, she was home alone, sitting in the living room watching TV. And their living room had these big, beautiful bay windows that looked out over everything. But it was winter, it was night, it was dark. She's facing away from the windows watching TVs when she sees a green hue drift over the wall. And she said the night before, the northern lights had given a beautiful show. So at first, when she sees the hue on the wall, she just thinks it's the northern lights again. She turns to look out the window and she sees 7 stars forming a perfect triangle, but they seemed brighter and closer than the rest. She said as she was watching it, the green light coming from those stars narrowed into what seemed like a laser and pointed directly at her. She says as the green light came to a focus on her, the whole house started to rumble as if it was experiencing an earthquake. She says at that point she forgot all about the lights. She just ran all the way downstairs to like the walkout basement and hid underneath the stairs, and she was trying to plan for what to do if the house fell down. Rumbling goes on for a few minutes, but the house was fine. Eventually it stops and she walks out into her bedroom, which is also on the basement level. She said her basement window was ground level, so she could look up, and as she walked into her room, she noticed the whole room was lit up from what seemed like a floodlight coming through the window. At that point, she had absolutely no idea what was going on, so she turns to come out of her room, and when she walks out of her room into the main basement area, she comes face to face with what she can only describe as grays. They were about 7 feet tall, were thin. She said if they reached their arm up, they could easily touch the ceiling. They had large black eyes and very small mouths. She said their eyes had no iris, and their heads were not disproportionate to their bodies, but they were definitively tear-shaped, and she said she was frozen in fear. She said they just stared at her, and her heart was beating so fast she remembers hearing her pulse in her ears. She noticed at that point that her dog was in the room with her, and he seemed frozen too. She said at this point a thought crossed her mind that somehow that they had frozen reality, but she's not sure. One closest to the door to the garage reaches out its hand as if it's going to touch the dog, and she said she snapped out of it, she ran toward it, and she pushed its hands away from the dog. And she said the feeling of touching it felt like poking the belly of a well-fed lizard. She said it took a step back, and its face was expressionless, but she got the sensation that it was studying her and deciding what to do. Then all of them started taking steps toward her, and the next thing she knew, she woke up on the couch, and the time was 2 hours later. The dog was across from her on the chair. She said she thought it was just a nightmare, but her body ached all over. She immediately felt better, realizing it was just a nightmare, until she realized how messed up the house was. Pictures were knocked off the walls. There were shelves of trinkets that had been strewn all about. Things in the bathroom were thrown all over too, so she immediately gets online and she looks up the system that records earthquakes in Alaska. There had been no recorded quakes. She says, I have no idea to this day if that was real or if it was a nightmare, but I have since developed an autoimmune disease and my doctors can't tell me what it is. She says her family has no history of autoimmune disease and she has very strange, bizarre symptoms. She also said that the northern lights appear brighter to her now as well. She says dozens of people from Wasilla have similar accounts. Now, her dad told her that HARP, the weather research station that I mentioned earlier, is not used for what they say it's used for. But because of the crackdowns now with censorship and things, I can't talk about it. I encourage you to go down this rabbit hole if this story piqued your interest. Alaska has some weird stories, you guys. This next story...
I'll bring it up if you weren't going to say nothing about it. I'm not going down that rabbit hole.
Another one that I haven't shared previously, and it's another alien abduction story. The person did not indicate if they want to be anonymous, so we'll call them A just to stay on the safe side, but A said that it was a typical night. She was running errands and she was passing a school soccer field when she saw a UFO or a UAP in the sky. So she pulled over immediately because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She said it looked standard, typical saucer-shaped disc, and it was just kind of hovering above the field. So she pulls over, she's looking at it in her car, and the next thing she knows, this saucer is flying off into the sky. But she said 2 hours had passed, and she has no recollection of that time. She thought she just witnessed it, but isn't sure if something happened to her because it's almost like she has flashes of memories of something happened, but can't be certain. She didn't really think about it again for years because she had no explanation and didn't want to sound crazy until she meets a man whose father lived in the same town where she was from. And one day she's over there and he's telling her a story about how he was abducted by a UFO in the same area. And she finally feels the ability to speak on what she experienced. And she said, I think that happened to me. And he says, oh, well, this happened on this day at this time at this place. And she said, that's the same time that it happened to me. And she said she still can't explain it, but it's years later. She unfortunately has an autoimmune disease, which doctors can't find a cure for, don't know what's wrong with her. And this is a commonality I'm noticing in a lot of these stories, is that these people that have these dreams, or whatever you want to call them, are left with feelings of illness or with unexplainable medical complications that doctors just can't explain. I have another old story I want to share. This one I think is really interesting. She actually provided a lot of detail, so I'm going to include that clip.
I mean, when you go to sleep, you just go to another realm, so technically another nightmare. Somewhere, another universe, you going through it.
Here. Quick thing before I play this video. I am working on slowing down the pace. If you guys hate the fast talk, which I do for short form videos often, there is playback speed in YouTube settings. You can click that and slow down the speed for these stories if that makes it a little bit easier. But in all future content, I am working slowing down the pace just a little bit. A girl named Chloe emailed me and she was like, I have to tell you my story time about something unnerving that's been happening to me since I was a kid. She said she was primarily emailing me because she was curious for me to share her story to see if anybody else has had a similar experience or knows what this is, because she feels completely alone and like she can't relate to anybody. This story is called a hot air balloon. Chloe grew up on a military base and she moved around a lot as a kid. When she was in grade school, she was asked what her first memory was and she remembered it vividly. She was getting into a hot air balloon with her parents. She remembers the basket. She remembers the fire being lit in the balloon. She remembers her mother's pants. She remembers the clothes she was wearing. She remembers being extremely fearful as the balloon rose into the sky and crying and her parents consoling her. She remembers that they were in New Mexico for a festival. She remembers taking a photo with the man who took them up in the balloon when the balloon finally came down. She was crying and her parents had to console her and tell her to smile for the picture. She remembers the ride home in the family Jeep and her parents scolding her, telling her it should have been a good time. She gave me more details on what she remembers about the experience, but you get the idea. And she remembers feeling shame on the car ride home because she should have felt happy, but she was just a baby. She dreamed about the experience a lot as a kid because she remembered it so vividly, and especially the feeling of being scared. She didn't want to bring it up to her parents though because she didn't want to rehash an old argument, but one day she was curious, so she asked her dad for the photo. When she asked for the photo, her dad looked at her like she was completely crazy and told her that they have never been in a hot air balloon. He said, why would I take you in a hot air balloon so young? That's completely insane. She dug through all the family photo boxes and could not find the picture. Chloe said she's not had contact with her mother since she was 6, so she's unable to ask her about the events. But before her mother left, she had a little brother. So now there's her dad, her, and her brother. The family moves to a base in Arizona, and Chloe was about 7 or 8 at the time. The bases were extremely locked down at the time and inaccessible to normal civilians. But Chloe remembers waking up one night, seeing a light in her window, walking toward the light, looking out, and seeing her first gray face. She thought she was dreaming, so she talked to it, and she said it talked back, but its mouth wasn't moving. It actually didn't even have a mouth, but she could understand what it was saying telepathically. It told her she could do anything she wanted. It told her she could turn her curtains into swords if she wanted. So she looked at them, pointed them, and said, turn to swords, and the curtains did. She laughed. She didn't feel scared, and she said she was rather at ease. The gray face heard her laugh, and it said, very good, Chloe, and she said, how do you know my name? And it said, we've met before. It tells her that its reality has layers and she's not meant to be a part of it. And she says, well, how will I know when I'm meant to be? And she hears somebody move behind her. She turns around and her dad's standing in the doorway watching this entire interaction. He tells her she's been sleepwalking and to go back to bed. She turns back to the window and the gray face is gone. But her sleepwalking increases after this. She goes to the window nightly to talk to nothing. And it continues until the families moved to another base in Texas. It got even stranger in Texas. She would walk into her father's room at night covered in a sheet and try talking to him about time and reality. He put cameras up. He put locks on the tops of the doors where she couldn't reach because sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the yard. And he eventually put locks on her bedroom door as well because he was worried about her opening window and falling out or leaving the house and walking into traffic. Her sleepwalking continued until she became estranged and moved out on her own. But jumping back a bit, the family was stationed at Fort Bliss, and Chloe and her brother often went to her dad's friend's house after school because her dad was a single parent at this time. He was working all the time and he needed someone to watch the kids. Chloe calls the guy John for this story, and she said she loved John. He was great. He was super nice to the kids. She loved going to his house. One day she sees an alien poster on his wall, and she asks him about it, and he starts talking to them about aliens and Roswell and gray faces. This excited Chloe because she looked at herself as a magical girl, but her father would always say, stop saying that. You're not a magical girl. He was extremely Catholic. He believed that Ouija boards and being a seer was bad. And anytime she talked about space or reality or time, he would tell her to effing cut it out. He was a sergeant major in the military, and her behavior was extremely embarrassing to him. Chloe says when John first brought up gray faces, she felt excited. It was like, finally, I can talk to somebody about this. But then she had what she describes as her first panic attack. Her eyes started blurring. She started seeing black. And John asked her if she wants to go outside. They go outside. John asks her what's wrong. She tells him all about her dreams of the hot air balloons and seeing the gray faces outside of her window. And she says John tells her that she has been chosen and that she needs to accept her fate or fall victim to it. She says looking back, this was a highly inappropriate thing to say to a child, but she was glued to him. She needed to know the information that he had for her. And he actually tells her that he's been visited multiple times and that every time they visit, you just have to allow whatever they're going to do to happen. She says she never told her father or brother about this conversation with John, although he never asked her to keep it a secret. But after that, she kept talking about time, space, and reality and how none of it's real, and her father ends up heavily medicating her as a child. Chloe ends up in therapy for years, and she refused to speak at this point. She said in therapy she would just count the colors in the cars in the parking lot, and then she would go home. She says she behaved well as a child because she was extremely afraid of being committed as it was threatened often in her household. She says she's 28 now and she still has this dream, but she's angry about it because she feels like she's missing a core memory, or maybe she blocked something out because something traumatic happened. She says she's gone down a lot of internet rabbit holes and she's discovered something called the hot air balloon theory, which is a lot of stories of people explaining similar things that have happened to them. And the general consensus seems to be that their memory has been replaced. She says she has not been visited again as an adult, but she truly does believe she's a magical girl and says she can move through reality as she pleases. She says it's insane how easy it is for her to get anything she wants if she puts intention toward it. With that, I would just say that's manifestation, but she says she's always felt like the black sheep of her family, and she has thoughts sometimes where she wonders if she's even human or meant to be here. She says all of that aside, she's doing well. She's in therapy, she has a successful career, she is sober, and a lot of people would say that her life is absolutely lovely, but she says she's under the belief that she's not really here, that she's just a vessel for something else. She says she lives her life waiting for the next step or sign, but she's made peace with it. And she's ended her email by saying that she's a little bit fearful that she'll be called upon again. I'm going to tag Chloe in the caption here. So if you have any questions for her, just comment and maybe she'll comment back. This next story gave me goosebumps. It came from someone named Madeline, and I actually just read it before.
Man, this shit could be true because me, myself, I done had dreams that I've been visited, but I ain't never seen a gray face. The person's face always be too shiny like the sun. And they be having a white robe, you feel me? But I believe it because you feel me, people be having dreams, bro. I done even had dreams. I was on other people's ships, and it was a voice talking to me saying these ships on the way to Earth, and these things were speaking a different language. But I could understand what they were saying. They were saying humans are stupid, and they were laughing on their way to Earth. But the voice was saying, "I'll protect you. They not gonna hurt you." But anyway, so people are in tune, man. It's 2026. All that thinking is just a conspiracy, all this, then the Epstein files. Look, everything is everything. That's all I gotta say. You understand? We all a product of beings that been here since the beginning. Cause if they died, we wouldn't be here. So we still here. And we are, they DNA encoded in us with great grandmama, whatever, ancient times. And they done seen this shit. So this shit always happen, bro.
Starting this video, but I'm going to probably turn this into a short form video because it's that good. But Madeline said when she was about 7, 8, she and her sister shared a bedroom, and they had a set of bunk beds. Madeline had the top bunk and her older sister had the bottom bunk. She said the way the room was set up was basically the bunk bed faced the door, and to the left of their heads was a window. And they lived in a residential area, and Madeline had gotten into the habit of counting cars instead of sheep as she was trying to fall asleep. She said every time a car passed outside, the headlights would shine through and cast this kind of glow on the wall. And so there weren't many cars, but she found it kind of soothing to count the cars that did pass. One night, she realizes that the cars are coming faster and faster, and she thinks that's strange because there's not usually this many cars in the neighborhood. But then the flashes on the wall get faster and faster with more intensity until all of a sudden it's just this continuous stream of light that seems to be now changing color. She said it was incredible. She felt like she was in the middle of a kaleidoscope. And that's when she gets the sense that there's somebody outside of her house. Not just somebody, but actually three people, child size, she said she imagined. And she didn't know where this feeling was coming from. She didn't know how she knew that these beings were approaching her house. But she said she could feel them. And they didn't seem bad, they didn't seem good, they were just there. She said she could feel them as they moved into her house and seemed to look through the house like they were looking for something or examining everything. She said, I can't tell you how I could pick up on this energy, I just could, and I was starting to freak myself out, but I could tell when they were in the pantry examining the canned goods. Like, it was like they were collecting information. I could tell when they went into my parents' room, they went in the bathroom across the hall from us, they went into the attic, and by the time they were approaching my room, I was really freaking out. She said she could feel them coming down the hall, and she didn't want to see them, so she threw the covers over her head and she was panicking and she turned to face the wall and she said, I don't want to see them, I don't want to see them, I don't want to see them. But I felt them enter the room. She said they just seemed to be poking around. I could sense when they were at my sister's bunk below me. I don't know what they were doing. And then I could feel them approaching my bunk. She said one of them seemed to still be inspecting the room while the other two slowly poked their heads above the bar. She said one was at the foot of her bed and one came up the ladder right next to her head. She pretended to be asleep the entire time because, again, she didn't want to see them. She didn't want to face them. She didn't want to admit that this was real. And then nothing. The next thing she knows, her eyes are popping open and it's the next morning and sunlight is filling the room. She said she told her family about it the next day, but nobody else in her family sensed that anything was off. And while the other two slowly poked their heads above the bar. She said one was at the foot of her bed and one came up the ladder right next to her head. She pretended to be asleep the entire time because, again, she didn't want to see them. She didn't want to face them. She didn't want to admit that this was real. And then nothing. The next thing she knows, her eyes are popping open and it's the next morning and sunlight is filling the room. She said she told her family about it the next day, but nobody else in her family sensed that anything was off. And as the years passed, she kind of wrote the experience off as an anxiety-induced hallucination, and she never really felt like it was real. But she can't shake the realness of the experience. She still feels like it was real. And she said she's never shared this story on a large-scale platform before and would love any feedback or any theories of what actually happened to her because she doesn't know what to make of it. This last story came from someone named Jayla, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if this story fits into the alien UFO UAP episode, but it's still weird enough to be included, and I don't know where else to put it, quite frankly, because it does involve space. So make of this what you will. Jayla said that when she was 14, she was in the car with her sister, her mother, and her aunt. They were on their way from Georgia to Panama City Beach for vacation, popular vacation spot if you live in Georgia, so they drove. On the way there, they hit a set of railroad tracks in Georgia that she described as being slightly Dukes of Hazzard style and caused their car to go slightly airborne after hitting the tracks a little bit too fast. They go to Panama City Beach for the week. They have a great time. On the way back, her aunt was driving, and she said she remembered that these tracks were a little bit fun and bouncy, so she decided to go over them a little bit faster. This time, instead of going slightly airborne, Jada found herself floating in space. She said it was an out-of-body experience. There was no one else around her. She was just surrounded by galaxies and stars, and this was obviously met with pure confusion. She was looking around going, how am I in space? And it felt like hours passed as she floated there. She said she didn't necessarily feel bad or good. It was more like, did I die? Am I somewhere else now? What is happening? She said she felt like she was in space for hours until the car hit the road and she was snapped back into her body and she found herself in the backseat of the car. She said she couldn't have been in space for hours because she was snapped back into her body in a split second as they crossed the tracks. And she started freaking out, going, what the hell was that? And she looks at her mom, and her mom is also freaking out. But the aunt and the sister are looking at them like, why are you guys acting so weird? Apparently her mom grabs her hand and she goes, did you go to space? Were you in space? And meanwhile, they're getting side-eyed by the rest of their family. She said she and her mom have always had a strange, close connection, but nothing could explain what caused them to both experience the same thing separately going over those tracks. She said they still talk about it and they don't know what it was. She said they still joke about it and they say that they're glad the other one experienced it because nobody else would believe them. And I've never gotten a story like this before. I mean, I've gotten some weird stories about Georgia. I'm pretty sure there's some kind of glitch in the Matrix thing going on there. If you guys have heard the time travel glitch in the Matrix with Maria and John Doe, like that was a whole month of my life that I still can't explain. I'm still no closer to explaining what the hell was going on there. So I have tons and tons of alien stories, UFOs, UAPs, you name it. My inbox is full of these. If you guys like this topic, this episode, let me know and I will be happy, more than happy.
Okay. Well, y'all, like, comment, subscribe, and let me know. We'll check out more of her videos, so you got some good stuff, So, if you like alien stories, we'll check out more of Ashley Inc. But with that being said, I'll see y'all in the next one.
Don't stress out, honey, get through flight. Don't burn out, shout out to my lady. She stay down, and I don't give a fuck what they saying now. Ain't got us my pockets, I rejected by my dad. Shit really hurt me.